Ready? Oh, I didn't know. Okay. I'd like to call to order the May 8th, 2023 Apex Planning Board meeting. Diane, would you like to speak to that?
Sorry. So both the chair and vice chair are not here today, so we do need to have an acting chair appointed, and so we will need a motion to name one of the voting board members as the acting chair. There'll need to be a second and then a vote, and then the acting chair can begin the meeting. So I need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that Tim Royal be the acting chair for May 8th.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. So I'm the acting chair. Okay, so we'll get this started. We'll first start off with public comment. I do not believe anybody here is going to speak, but just for the record, the purpose of the public comment is to allow the public to speak on items that do not appear in this agenda under the public hearing section. Any member of the public wishing to comment on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in the agenda. So if you are here to speak on any of the agenda items, please sign in over here to your left.
Chair, should we do the invocation and pledge?
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
The public comment period is an opportunity for the public to express concerns or opinions, but is not intended to be question and answering session. During the public comment, the public may comment on any non-public hearing item, including the new business items that appear in this agenda. Comments from the public on new business items will not be taken into the agenda, so you must speak on the new business item. Public comment is the time to do so. All comments must be limited to 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes is up, the speaker will be asked by the chair to wrap up their comments. If there's a large number, which is not going to be today, limit that to 9 minutes for the entire group. Okay. Looks like we're getting signed in here. Okay. I think Mr. Braswell would like to say the invocation.
Thank you. Bow your heads, please. Thank you for gathering us here today. Please guide us through, lead and guide our decision to help this wonderful town. These things we ask in your name.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any new business items that are not on this list that need to be added?
No, we do not.
Do not, okay. Okay, so that's gonna move us on to consent item number 1, which is the public hearings, meeting minutes from last month, which was on April 10th, 2023. I'm assuming all the board members have read these meeting minutes, and for accuracy, are there any amendments that need to be made? Hearing none. Somebody like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Okay, we have a motion.
A second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all those who oppose? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes for the consent item number 1, meeting minutes. We're on to number, let's see here. Actually, this will be the public hearings number 1, which is the Parks Planning Project Manager. And on this item, we will need to recuse board member Ryan Akers. So if we can get a motion to recuse Ryan, I'll make a motion to recuse Ryan.
I could second.
I have a second. All who's in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose? Okay, Ryan, you are now recused. Okay, and Miss Angela is here to present. Miss Angela, you have the floor.
Good evening. So public hearing number 1 is proposed amendments to the bicycle pedestrian system map as a result of the public engagement and input that has been identified in the recommendations and implementation and action plan proposed in the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space, which is anticipated to be adopted on May 9th, and that is being presented later in tonight's meeting for your consideration as well. Proposed amendments address alignment changes that were recommended based on public input and requests for greenway connectivity that provide opportunities to complete corridors that would not be possible based on existing development. The public was engaged through maps and surveys that were provided during the public engagement and input opportunities for the master plan update. Feasibility studies were completed for Reedy Branch, Beaver Creek, and Big Branch Greenway, as they were the top scoring corridors from a newly developed prioritization matrix. Adjacent residents were sent notifications prior to the field studies, and input from residents and HOA representatives were received. Staff has grouped the recommended amendments into 3 categories: providing connectivity to the existing system. Items in this category fill gaps in the current system. Existing or planned development. Items in this category provide connectivity based on development patterns that have appeared through planned projects that might not have approvals, but that sufficient information or public input has been provided that identifies and an opportunity for connection. And added amendments based on the feasibility studies. Items in this category amend a proposed alignment and either connect projects that might not have been available or identified as possibilities in the past, or removes an alignment that cannot be constructed due to site issues and constraints. There are 14 amendments, number 1 through 14. I will provide a summary of each amendment and an overview of the why behind the requested change. And when I'm completed, Jenna Schaus and I are here to provide any additional clarifications or answer any questions on any of the amendments. So if you will take your notes on 1 through 14, we'll come back to them as you need. And this is an overview of all of the amendments, just so you can see that they're addressing greenway connectivity throughout the entire town boundaries. Amendment 1 adds proposed greenway sections that connect Wimberley Road to the American Tobacco Trail north of 815 Wimberley Road, and adds a north to south section that connects to existing greenway at Castleberry Trails. The NCDOT Rail Division prefers offset crossings of the ATT, and the proposed alignment would utilize an existing access easement for existing homes that would likely be converted as redevelopment occurred, which is why this connection does not align directly with the current White Oak Creek Greenway tie-in at Weddington, which is down here. The Castleberry subdivisions to the north have existing greenway that run north to south paralleling the ATT, and this trail would provide connectivity between any new development in this region. The proposed greenways will allow subdivisions on the west side of Wimberley to connect at several key points between the ATT trailhead at Wimberley Road and Green Level West Road, as connections to the ATT are limited. Amendment 2 adds a proposed greenway segment just south of the intersection of the American Tobacco Trail and Wimberley Road. The section would run east along an access easement through Army Corps land, crossing a Colonial Pipeline easement into the former Williams Tract parcel, which is part of future Wimberley Road parkland owned by the town. We have a recorded access easement with 2 bridges that follow this alignment from Wimberley Road to the tract. This will be a compacted stone trail similar to the ATT into the north area of the park, which will likely not have vehicular access due to environmental constraints. Amendment 3 adds proposed side path along the east side of Holt Road between Old Jenks Road and Howell Road, as it will expand bike pedestrian connectivity to an area as new residential projects have been developed. Planning staff indicated their preference was for the side path to be on the east side of Holt Road, as it would likely occur with the redevelopment of that area if it occurred in the future. This area has existing columns and fence along most of the proposed corridor, which could remain if proposed side path were installed at a reduced width. Sorry. On this item, the PRCR Advisory Commission asked that staff evaluate adding proposed side path along the north side of Jenks Road, Old Jenks Road, from Holt Road to the school site, which would be from here down. It was agreed that we would evaluate that for a possible future amendment, but it wouldn't be included at this time. Amendment 4 realigns South Walk proposed greenway by moving the greenway alignment that connects Apex Peakway to Gumdrop Path, so the greenway runs along the north side of the stream in that area, connecting at the Peakway near the intersection with Grappenhall Drive. South Walk is consistently a high requested corridor. At this time, there is no way to complete the greenway as currently shown as long as the Shangri-La Mobile Home Park remains. There are segments along the proposed corridor where easement was not recorded with development near Gumdrop Path. The proposed alignment provides a route that could be built without impacting or needing to remove existing residential homes. Amendment 5 adds proposed greenway from Chapel Ridge Road heading east to intersect with Beaver Creek North Greenway. The proposed greenway segment provides connectivity to Beaver Creek North Greenway from proposed side path along Chapel Ridge Road. Some of you may notice that the proposed alignment could fall within development that has been reviewed by TRC. Staff is exploring alternate alignments offline with development in process, as well as looking at alternate routes. The alignment proposed offers a chance to potentially provide greenway to be constructed with proposed development that is in review now, if available, but also allows flexibility to include with future development to the north if it cannot be worked out due to slope, riparian areas, and the Colonial Pipeline easement that run just south of it. Amendment 6 proposes the realignment of Reedy Branch Greenway, shifting the greenway to the south of Reedy Branch from Kelly Road to Rothwood Way. The alignment proposed is the result of an on-site feasibility study which determined that access from Abington was not possible due to frequent flooding and constrained access easements that would not be accessible or constructible adjacent to existing homes. It also adds Creekside Commons and Homestead Park proposed greenway access locations, removes the Abington proposed greenway access as shown, providing connections, but it will provide connections to the greenway from sidewalk along Kelly Road and Rothwood Way. It adds Stratford at Abington proposed greenway access at Rothwood Way, connecting to currently proposed greenway that extends to join the existing Reedy Branch Greenway at Goliath Lane. The proposed alignment shifts the greenway south of Reedy Branch to mitigate some of these potential issues, which also offers opportunities to connect to neighborhoods that previously did not have connections planned. And just because we knew that this was something that was a substantial change from our existing plan, the greenway would have been required to be constructed just behind this fence area. And most of that area is along the back of these lots. The entire corridor is in floodway, not just floodplain. So it would be difficult for us to get permitting to construct in that location. Amendment 7 adds proposed greenway within Apex Nature Park, linking existing trail near the park entrance at 2600 Evans Road through the park and extending west to proposed greenway along the Beaver Creek corridor with a realignment of proposed greenway connection from Bella Casa in the south. The addition of the proposed greenway improves bike pedestrian circulation within the park and fills a gap between planned and constructed greenway segments. As a part of the feasibility study, staff and consultants examined several alignments through the park, including a connection near the turnaround for the restrooms amphitheater. With the increased traffic that the future environmental education building would bring, staff was concerned that there would be a bicycle pedestrian conflict, so move the trail to the perimeter of the park. There is a berm with plantings along much of the southern property line, so many of the adjacent homes will not be in direct view of the trail. There are numerous environmentally sensitive and low-lying, continuously wet areas within this park, as well as much of the property is in conservation easements, so there are limitations on where the trail can be constructed. Amendment 8 adds a proposed grade-separated bike ped crossing at the intersection of Richardson Road and the Beaver Creek Greenway. Richardson is an NCDOT maintained road, and the addition of proposed crossing is proposed to improve the safety of the crossing at the build-out of Richardson Road as a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. Richardson Road frequently floods at the creek to the north of this crossing, and this grade-separated crossing will likely require a cost-sharing agreement between the town and NCDOT when Richardson Road and the bridge are improved, similar to what has occurred with Apex Barbecue Road and Kelly Road, where Beaver Creek crosses it. Amendment 9 adds proposed street-side greenway along the north side of Barker Road between the Chatham County line and New Hill Olive Chapel Road. This would provide bike ped access from the Recreation Activity Center planned at Hume Olive and New Hill Olive Chapel Roads and the southern terminus of the ATT corridor that Wake County has easements. It could connect into Chatham County, ultimately providing access to Jordan Lake at Pool Road. Chatham County currently has no greenway plans east of the lake adjacent to the town of Apex jurisdiction, but with the request for access to water being a high priority of residents during the master plan process, as well as the Great Trail State Plan indicating that bike access to the lake was desired by Wake County residents, this western connection could provide assistance in making access possible in the future. Amendment 10 adds proposed greenway connecting the future Olive Farm Park to a proposed side path within the Retreat at Friendship Station project within parkland to be dedicated with the development project and ties to side path connecting to the Little Beaver Creek Greenway corridor. Amendment 11 adds proposed greenway that starts at the eastern terminus of Padstone Drive, heading southwest along the north side of Big Branch, then splits after it crosses Flint Valley Lane, with its two ends terminating at the grade-separated crossing of South Salem Street across from Depot 499, and at the side path along the future extension of Widger Lane. This area has no public park or greenway access currently, and this proposed alignment would provide connectivity to 2 elementary schools, links to 2 grade-separated crossings of CSX rail corridor, along with Big Branch Greenway providing connections to downtown Apex, Verdia, transit stops, and more. Amendment 12 adds proposed side path along the east side of East William Street from Sunset Lake Road to Highway 55 along the eastern side of Highway 55 to join the previously proposed side path south of future Jesse Drive extension. The addition of the proposed side path will provide bike ped connectivity for several residential areas to the Verdia project future Wake Tech campus, and Middle Creek Greenway bike lanes are not Bike lanes are not proposed along East William Street, and this completes the corridor from the town's boundaries and aligns with NCDOT plans for HL 007 NC 55 at Technology Drive and East William Street improvements. Amendment 13 adds proposed greenway along the east side of a tributary of Middle Creek bordering the future Felton Grove High School, north of Stevenson Road and Wild Blossom Drive. It also proposes side path on the south side of Colby Chase Drive extension east of Smith Road, continuing along Rhythm Drive to Stevenson Road, which would provide connectivity to the Middle Creek Greenway. Greenway is planned on the south side of Felton Grove campus. Staff continues to pursue trail connections to these developing schools and has been successful partnering with Wake County Public Schools staff on connectivity between schools and the neighborhoods residents that surround the campuses. Greenways do not provide safe routes to school due to standards regulations, but we are finding alternatives to carpooling where busing is provided and not being utilized. This area of the town's ETJ saw requests for greenways and recreation, and this amendment expands the offerings to the greatest extent possible. And Amendment 14. Based on the feasibility study completed for the Big Branch Greenway, this amendment removes proposed Big Branch Greenway between James Street and Apex Peakway, and instead utilizes the proposed side path along the west side of Tingen Road from Apex Peakway to James Street. This change would remove Wake Acres' proposed greenway access and eliminates the need for greenway easement recorded in Golden View. The proposed alignment along Tingen Road side path would provide a direct connection to Apex Elementary School and aligns with the proposed grade-separated crossing of the CSX rail corridor to South Salem Street. The proposed amendments also includes realignment of the Big Branch Greenway to the west side of Big Branch, south of the Apex Peakway. This greenway realignment would relocate the Lexington proposed greenway access and add Bradley Terrace proposed greenway access. The existing proposed Big Branch Greenway alignment north of Apex Peakway, just to give you an idea, crosses 9 residential private lots that are currently developed and is located in areas where steep slopes along the corridor, slopes at access locations, stream alignment, and existing sanitary sewer would make construction of trail impossible. This concludes our presentation on map amendments. The PRC Advisory Commission recommended approval of these amendments at their April 26th meeting. PRC staff and planning staff recommend approval of the proposed amendments. And please let me know if you have any questions. We'll go back and cover them.
Thank you, Angela. We appreciate it. Are there any questions from the board for Ms. Angela?
I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
Do any of these proposed greenways touch or dissect a private property? And if yes, should we assume that discussion is underway with the property owner?
So the proposed alignments for us always are a guide for a location, usually following either a riparian area, sewer corridors, open space that's been recorded in an HOA. But for us to actually go to construction, we would have to survey sites, meet with adjacent or property owners, acquire easements if we don't already have them. And so while we had this information published as conceptual during our master planning process, we may not have been able to be in contact with every property owner, but we couldn't build a greenway on their property without working with them and securing an easement at a minimum, or buying property to be able to construct and will design, get a plan approval and construct.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
I have a few questions. You just mentioned something, sewer corridors. Recently, it's come to my attention that the town of Apex Utility Group doesn't allow the overlap of greenways and sewer corridors. You have to separate them. Have you experienced that recently as well?
So we allow an overlap of the easements. There is a provision where you can request an exception if pavement needs to be closer than 10 feet to the actual sewer pipe. So if we know that there's an area where there's an existing corridor and there's no way to expand it, then we can request an exception and work with our utility department to make sure that we're in agreement of the best case scenario for that location. But they try in new development to keep them separated, because what would happen is if a corridor had some sewer repair that was needed in an emergency scenario, they would have to tear up the greenway, and then somebody would have to figure out who's, is Parks and Rec going to fund a new project to put it back down? If we can avoid that, that's ideal. But we do have an overlap of easements. It's just a wider footprint than simply what was required for the sewer.
So kind of compounding on that, and this gets into a little bit of the minutia, but oftentimes the sewer rides along the creek as well because you want it low so everybody can connect to it right where the greenway would be. What is the state regulation for buffer intrusions for greenways? Are you allowed to ride in that 50-foot buffer
Yes.
parallel?
Yes.
Okay. It's just me. I have concerns that we don't allow the overlap of the I get the sewer maintenance issue, but I also know that if you can't overlap them truly, you're just decimating more of the buffer. So where's the trade-off? Apex has sewer maintenance concerns that go away, but we're decimating 50 feet of trees for the intended purpose for the buffer. So it's like,
Right. So
where's the value?
the standard of greenway easement is 20 feet. So we have a 10-foot trail with 5-foot shoulders. Usually a minimum sewer, and sewer widths depend on the size of the pipe and the depth that's needed. And then it's sort of a V that shapes out that sets the sewer easement width. So we've got it set where the standard, the preferred standard is that you can overlap the easements by 5 feet. So if you had a 20-foot sewer easement, you would only be required to have a 35-foot combined easement. So we've reduced the 5-foot shoulder so that that can overlap. And then the pavement should sit 10 feet, the edge of pavement should sit 10 feet from the edge of pipe. But there is an exception provision that's allowed. So if we know that, you know, there's wetlands or something significant that we want to protect, then we can ask our water resources director for an exception, and a development can do that as well and shift them to overlap more. We would just have to go through that process. So the standard is to try to keep them separated, but where we identify a reason or rationale for that. And we have many where they cross over, actually cross the pipe to make a bend, you know, work or something. And so we're trying to balance everybody's regulations, but we do have that. The exception is there, we do use it. And parks planning staff works with developments as project greenways that are not town funded, meaning they're being built with a residential subdivision. We work with and support how to make the greenway the best usable trail, even if that means asking for that exception. So it's not our preference always to push it off to the side if there's a good reason to make it overlap. So.
I had to go into the maps. Can you go back to map 1 and 2, which is Wimberley? I just know enough about this area because that's my part of town. Some of those properties has a significant pond on it, and it looks like it goes right through a pond. Is that something that's considered, or if that property were to develop, we would come in and be like, oh well, Greenway obviously can't go through a jurisdictional pond, we'll move it then?
Right.
And is there a consideration that maybe that would be a side path in lieu of a greenway because it might follow a road that would bisect those properties? Is that considered a potential substitute?
Whenever, we looked at this as a potential for a redevelopment. So this wasn't we have the American Tobacco Trail. We have several single family, large lot properties. There isn't a demand or a need for those to connect unless they redevelop. And so we would be looking at what the redevelopment plan was, and the way that it connects on the 2 projects to the north was that it was at the back of the site, near cul-de-sacs. And so it provided a link for the cul-de-sacs between 2 projects, but also provided one access to the ATT, which is what NCDOT, they want them to be a quarter to half a mile separation on the same side of the ATT corridor. And so the only way for residents to get access is to follow that separation. And so when we look at the project, if this came in as 1 or 2 developments similar to what happened to the north, we would look at the best case scenario. Obviously not going through a pond if it was remaining, where we could have the less impacts crossing a creek. I know there's some slope issues coming down from the north property, and so it will all depend on how that redevelops. But yes, it could be sidewalk, it could be widened sidewalk. We would probably come back in with a plan amendment based on the approved or the plans that were in approval with a transportation plan amendment, just to finalize its location based on what development was happening at the time.
On map number 6, Creekside Commons, the map what you just showed was pretty cool on Wimberley. So if those were to develop, it's a public greenway shown on the future greenway plan, so they'd be eligible for reimbursement. Yes. On the park's impact fee, which I think is like $4,000 per rooftop for single family detached, roughly. So you can pay for a lot of greenway. On map number 6, Creekside Commons is largely developed out. How does the funding mechanism work? Would that be like a CIP?
So this project would be town funded and any other funding partners we could find.
Okay, so if we did like a fee in lieu on a new development, they didn't put in greenway, they'd pay into that park fee, and that would be
one option. Or we've built some of Beaver Creek section we're getting ready to bid is LAP funded, so we get NCDOT federal money, and then we did a bond referendum. So yeah, this is replacing the one to the north. The Abington project recorded easement that was shared 20-foot sewer greenway, so we would be on top of them. and it's in the floodway, so it would need to be a structure like a boardwalk, which we can't put on top of the sewer pipe. Their dedication at the time that it was developed in the 1990s was to purchase Kelly Road Park. So they didn't do a construction of Greenway per the plan because at that time, they were trying to acquire the Kelly Road Park land. And so their fees went to purchase the park with a couple other projects, which is why they didn't have Greenway constructed at the time.
It was going to be a question on number 9, which was the street side greenway along Barker Road. That seemingly is just outside of anything development in Apex would happen, I would think, but maybe not. Would that also be something that the town would take on as like a funded?
Yes.
Okay.
So the long range plan comprehensive plan shows this is a recreation activity center. The Tobacco Trail is constructed to just north of what you see on the page. And so Wake County has the easement rights to develop the ATT basically just north of the New Hill Olive Chapel Road. We have Olive Farm Park to the east. And so the idea of this being a location where development might occur that might have an outfitter or somebody who might rent kayaks or canoes or do trips. And if you follow Barker Road out to the line, it turns into Pool Road and it dead ends with a parking lot that you can access Jordan Lake. And so the idea behind this is, one, maybe that's as the ATT finishes or gets completed south to New Hill Olive Chapel Road, if that activity center were to develop based on the way that the long range plan shows, this would be the ideal way for us to get out to the lake. And it ties into a lot of like we talked about, Great Trail State Plan, which says people want to get to the lake from Apex. At the same time, the Tobacco Trail runs, miles to the north, and there's other connecting greenways. And so people could literally vacation and ride out to the lake and stay here versus going someplace else to a campsite and to the lake and riding their bikes. So we're trying to look at a long-term way to get people out from Apex, where we don't really have a big amenity like that, but we could, and more safely than on 64, as an example of an alternative route to get to the lake.
The final question I had on map number 8, grade separation. Would that be a tunnel, or does that ride with a bridge with Richardson Road?
So obviously we don't really know, but the creek is very low and the bridge is very low to the ground. And so we assume that when they go to do a Richardson Road widening and bridge improvement, that it would be an elevated bridge. Where that's located is where we're showing it, where the Greenway is now, is probably not as far as that bridge would extend. So we would work with NCDOT on their plans of whether or not that's a culvert crossing close to where we are, under the end of a bridge coming back down to grade, and Richardson Road is rising to the south as well. So is it an extended bridge with an open air crossing? Is it a culvert? We would be working with them. But if we identify it on our plan when they go to do that improvement in the future, we can do a cost sharing that wouldn't be available if we don't designate it that way.
So it seems like most of these proposed greenways connect other greenways and parks together, except for the First Amendment. I feel like the greenway is proposed parallel to American Tobacco Trail.
Yes.
Is there a reason for this one?
So this is tied to the NC Rail Division. So they protect the rail corridors in the state. So they're like NCDOT's rail arm, and they have a plan to protect the American Tobacco Trail for a future rail corridor. I know that's not what we all think of it as, but for them, it's a leased agreement to Wake County, Chatham County, and so the rail division is protecting the corridor for the potential that it could turn back to a rail corridor. So they limit how many connection points we can have that break through or into the trail. And they want them at least a quarter to a half mile apart, and they want them offset so that that opening is not as substantial as if it were exactly lined up. So it doesn't look like a main crossing. So this allows us to connect the neighborhoods that could develop or might develop in that area in the future by linking them together so that they can connect where there's already a drive access that was an older, it used to be there and then it was cut off. But you can get to the American Tobacco Trail from that access on the south, the existing one that's been put in by development to the north, and it just links all of them up together. It also provides that if there's redevelopment on the west side of Wimberley Road, it would be similar to what we've done here at Burlap Drive, where sidewalk connection across allows people from development to the west to cross Wimberley Road, get on the sidewalk, and connect to the ATT. So this would just provide a southern route for homes that are down south of Castleberry Road, west of Wimberley Road, to be able to connect at a southern point. And we try to do in places where we can a loop so that people don't always have to go up and come back, but they could make a loop around and go through the neighborhood to come up and the tobacco trail to come back out.
And this is conceptual. I just have
Yes.
to keep in mind.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Seeing there's no other questions, Angela, we appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, being that this is a public hearing, is there any person in the public? Yes, ma'am, you'd like to come on up and just state your name and your address?
Bonnie Townsend, 701 Winter Hill Drive. My concern is they're putting all these homes, just like on Fairview, 3 homes on one lot, and you flooded the house next. We're all springs underneath. And I don't hear anybody, we're building more homes, but they're springs, and I don't think anybody's mentioning, that we're full of it in Apex, where you put 3 homes, and then on Winter Hill, coming into the left, they built the homes and flooded us out below, the homes that were below, and flooded them out. So I don't see anybody mentioning the levels of the, water, like the pond, Zero Lakeview, because Balcom, I told them, they didn't even know, that it was on water. And it comes down to my house, which should never have been built, and it just will flood us out. And nobody's, you're letting homes be put up without looking in the ground. And it wasn't a problem until we're now building too many. So please look.
Thank you. Anybody else in public comment? Okay, seeing that there is none, we're going to close the public comment section and bring this back to the board for discussion. I think there was a lot of questions asked. Being that this is conceptual planning at this point, I think it's kind of good to put everything down on paper, what the town would like to see happen in the future, so that way we have an idea of how things will develop in the future if that goes that direction. I think this is not an approval of this being constructed, but rather conceptualizing where we would like to go in the future.
Yeah, it looks good. I know a lot of work goes into these, public input and neighbors, and it's good that we are willing to adapt and change as Apex does to meet changing needs.
I would agree. I think it's a very comprehensive plan. They put a lot of thought into it. The planning staff, Parks and Rec, the Cultural Resource Advisory Commission, and I think they did a fantastic job.
I think it was interesting, or not interesting, but very relevant that Angela pointed out too, that, we go after funding mechanisms and it has to be on this plan in order to attain those. Greenways are expensive. I think it's like $1 million a mile or something. I don't know, Angela, if you know that off the top of your head, but it's silly expensive. And, for us to have to use taxpayer dollars is crazy. But in certain cases, the development community can get offset through impact fee credits. And having this on the plan, it helps get, for all of Apex, we all benefit from the Greenways. So I think this is great. It's a good move.
I think this organizes and streamlines all the connections of the greenways. We could see this is part of infrastructure for the town as well as a hot amenity for the community. And I think it's a great idea, and it seems like we're, even the safety, life safety for the community was thought of. Everything was inclusive in this future plan. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yes, I believe this, plans like this is what sets Apex apart, and that will be why I will be recommending approval.
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Keith.
Yes.
Okay, we have a second. Okay. Any other comment? We'll go to vote. All those who are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, we need to have a motion to bring Board Member Ryan Akers back.
Motion to bring Ryan back?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those who oppose? Okay, welcome back, Ryan. Okay, brings us to item number 2, but it looks like this one is not going to be heard. Lauren, is that correct? Okay.
The applicant's here if there's any need for questions or anything. I'm here as well.
Okay, so this is going to be moved on to a future date?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, brings us to item number 3, which is going to be Amanda. Speak on the public hearing, a possible motion regarding rezoning case 23CZ05, the Pleasant Park.
All right, good afternoon. So this is a rezoning of Pleasant Park, which is located off of Old US 1, just west of 540. It is under development, or at least phase 1 of the project. The total property is about 92.9 acres in size. And the property is currently zoned rural residential, as is the typical zoning in that area. There is Tech Flex conditional zoning and PUD conditional zoning to the north. The purpose for the rezoning is to both zone the property conservation buffer, conditional zoning, which is the typical zoning district for Apex Parks, but also to propose some zoning conditions to give flexibility for the primary entrance signage and some other wayfinding signage on the property. Some additional flexibility from our current sign standards. The applicant conducted their neighborhood meeting on February 27th, and you have that meeting report. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the 2045 land use map, which designates the property as park, public, or private. And so, as I indicated, some of the zoning conditions, the first 4, are related to sign standards. So the current UDO limits the number of sign colors to 4, not including white and black. And our wayfinding signage program includes 6 colors. And so this will help direct people to different parts of this large park. So that's the first condition, is to increase the number of colors. In addition, the proposal is to increase the maximum height of wayfinding signage to 10 feet, increase the height of the monument signage up front. The maximum height is 6 feet, but the column of the sign for Pleasant Park is at 7 feet 9 inches to the top of the column. And to increase the sign area allowed for the monument signs. Large park, and town believes deserves a nice, large, attractive monument feature. The remaining conditions were added at the suggestion of the Environmental Advisory Board. Most of these conditions were already reflected in the approved site plan. As you know, the park's under development. It already has approved plans, and so the conditions that were added are met by the approved site plan. Planning staff is recommending approval of the rezoning with the conditions as offered by the applicant. The rezoning is consistent with the 2045 land use map, and the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will implement stricter environmental conditions than the UDO requires, update the zoning for this parcel to be consistent with other town parks, and improve the health and wellness of residents by providing additional recreational programs and open space for residents. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Are there any questions for Amanda? Okay. All right, being that this is also a public hearing, is there anybody in the public who would wish to speak on this agenda item? Yes, sir, come on up. If you have not done so, just make sure to sign in, and when you come up, please say your name and your address.
Thomas Zaffaris, 3325 Pleasant Plains Road. So I am kind of directly across the street. So with the signage being said, is there some signage that is proposed that is going to be actually on Pleasant Plains Road, making sure traffic does not go through the residents and the development back there? How deep will the signs be on Pleasant Plains Road, making sure that people go into the park without passing the entrance? Because everybody's turning around kind of.
Angela, I'm glad we have parks.
So I'm back. This is another project. So the big monument sign that has the big Pleasant Park letters will sit right here, just before the main entrance turn into the project. So one of the goals was to have this be a very large, catch your attention sign to say, this is where you go. We have also provided a, where you can see here, there's a emergency exit gate, meaning there's a road built, but we built it as sort of a half a cul-de-sac with the idea that once people, if they were to pass and realize that they had missed this entrance, there is a turn lane left to go into that space as well, where you can see the big monument sign. But there is a half a cul-de-sac sort of carved into the property outside the right-of-way that would act as an emergency exit for the park. It is gated, rolling gate, locked unless we need it as a part of the site plan approvals. But it also is meant to be sort of a turnaround. Somebody sees the amenities, realizes they've gone past, and can turn around there versus driving. Right now, it's not really clear seeing that because this road has not been completed, nor has this. So the roads are there on the park side, but they're not all the way out to the right-of-way because we're working on those road improvements of Pleasant Plains out to the railroad track crossing. But we think the big monument sign that we're asking for, the bigger request, I don't know that we have any. It's a Pleasant Plains is a NCDOT road, but I could look into whether or not we could have any. I mean, I don't know what we'd be allowed to put on the road as far as more of the directional signage, like a stop sign, or that would have something that would say turn left before you got there, but there's a left-hand turn right before you would cross into there. Anything else would be in the front yards of the properties, but we might be able to put something on the left-hand side that would sort of be a, you've passed it, turn around here. But we were hoping that when those roads are connected and that big monument sign that's sits in that curve and there's a left-hand turn lane into that site, that would be visible from anybody as soon as they cross over the railroad tracks.
Question for you, will the section that is carved out, will that be marked as kind of a turnaround, or is that just not marked? Or
we didn't mark it. I mean, it's the idea was that we knew that if there were ever a reason that we might need to get people out of the south, it was designed as an exit only in emergency situations, but we kind of, it's wider, you can see it, it's where people are going into the park now. That's our construction access while the other road work was being done. So I don't know that we don't have it signed for that now. That's something we could look into because it would be on our side of the property. But I think once the road is cut through and the turn lane is there and marked, it feels like it would be more obvious than what it looks like out in the field today. And that's part of the reason why we created the entry mount. There's mounded landscaped areas within this big oval area here. And the monument sign is on a curved wrapped with letters that are this tall in a 7-foot tall column with the town seal on it. So if you came across and you were making that left-hand turn there, you would see the turn lane and see the monument sign before you turned. Okay. So we feel like it's pretty, will be pretty significant as far as directional into the park.
Into the fall and winter time when the sun goes down much earlier, is it gonna be like kind of a lit area where they still might play ball? Still need to get in that park area where it's kind of more, kind of, not trying to highlight it, but kind of lit up, so if you, because once you start going down Pleasant Plains, there are no lights, so it's just kind of a
So
very
there are
dark
lights
area.
on Recreation Drive and Kingsview Trail, and there are within the park. The monument is actually lit, each letter is individually lit from below,
Okay.
with the idea that that would light the sign but not light the surrounding area. So it should be visible at night too. And I imagine that we will operate into evening hours with athletic and some of the amenities. We put like parking lot lighting in the playground area so it could be utilized while other people, like family members, were having a game. You could be in that space as well.
Okay,
There is no lighting down by these courts, though, just the parking lot.
I guess the traffic just being a concern, if you miss
Yeah,
a turn.
it would
I
be
mean,
there.
How are you gonna know to turn back around? But I mean, if it's lit up in the very front with lights on that sign, I would imagine that's kind of,
And there's lights along the drive here. So, and as soon as you would, I mean, you would be coming in and seeing the lights there, not to your, directly ahead.
okay. All right, are there anybody else in the public who would like to speak on this agenda item?
If I can just add, excuse me, would there be any wordage where the left to go into the park might say, last turn or only turn, or, because there would be then just one entrance into that park? Is there gonna be wordage on that possibly, or is there anything proposed or any signage that?
I'd have to check about any signage that's along Pleasant Plains on the right-hand side. All of our signage that we have is the monument signs and the directional signs that are inside the park, or that large one that's out the front. I don't know what we'd be allowed to, because we'd have to get somebody's permission, NCDOT's permission to put any kind of signage on Pleasant Plains Road itself.
Well, even on the left side, on the park side, something that might say, only turn, or, only entrance, because there is just one entrance. If, it might be a little bit confusing where they think that, okay, there's one turn here, if it's busy, if everybody's in that left lane, there's gonna be a straight lane for more of the residents, that they're just gonna keep going, hoping that there could possibly be another entrance in the park, which there's not gonna be. And there's just one little turnaround in front of my house, and I'm sure that that could be a little confusing. Does that make any sense?
I'd have to look. As big as the sign is supposed to be and what it will look like when it's finished,
We don't know.
I don't know that
Okay.
anything else we would add in front of that would be more beneficial than it's at completion. But, I mean, it's something we'll talk to our engineers and see if there's something that they could recommend.
Okay.
I have a question. My name is Jim.
Jim, would you like to come up?
I don't have to, but I can.
Come on up, state your name and your
I live
address.
next to him. I'm the next house down.
Okay,
There's been a lot of action over the last few weeks. On the weekends, cars pulling into that emergency exit. I'm just curious, that turnaround, is it going to be you pull in your car and you go like this and you go back down Pleasant Plains, or is it going to be an actual, kind of like a circle where they'd be spinning around?
my understanding, it sounds like it's gonna be kind of a half circle right now for
'Cause,
emergency.
I mean, I'm getting turnarounds already in my driveway. I'm sure you're getting them.
Yeah.
People pulling in my drive. I'm already looking into getting fencing and put a gate at the front of my driveway, because it's, we've been living in a rural area, and
Sure.
I see the cars already driving in, checking it out. I'm the one usually locking the cable on the weekends. I have a combination code. That gate will be locked, right?
Yeah, it's a big rolling gate.
Okay. And yeah. And the park is gonna be closed at what time?
I don't know the operation hours right
Yeah.
now.
And there'll be somebody locking the gate up every
Yes,
night.
there's gates on all the
Okay.
internal entrances.
Jim, I've got a question. Are the entrances to the park currently open for the looky-loos that are coming down? Like, can they get into the park today?
Yeah. There is a cable, but it doesn't get put across. And
I'm just thinking the way if I was somebody that wanted to see the progress down there and I can't get in, I'm going to do exactly what the people are doing right now. They're going to drive down, turn around your driveway, but when it's open, they got somewhere to go. So they're not going to turn around in your driveway, maybe.
But currently, they're not locking that. It's not a gate; it's just a cable with a master lock on it.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else would probably like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, seeing that there are none, we will close the public hearing, bring this back to the board for consideration. I'll start off. I think signage is obviously something that's necessary if we're limited to the number of colors we can use. I think opening up so that way we can understand better. This is a pretty big park, so there's a lot of things going on. And I think that would be to our advantage to be able to add additional signage or change colors if we need to. I don't think that should be much of an issue there. As far as people coming down and turning it, some of this is going to be curiosity traffic. We won't be able to stop that. I get this in my own neighborhood, and it's an established neighborhood from the 80s. So we still have people that are going to come around and take a look. We would never be able to stop all of it. But I do think whatever efforts we can make to make sure that we try to allow people to find their way around. And I think that's where we're going with now, is trying to make sure that the signage is correct for this project. So anyone else?
Sounds like the entrance is not complete, and that's the main driver. And having that bigger signage in the front would definitely help locate where the park is. And if I were driving and trying to locate a park, if I see a huge sign, I would enter it that way as a first timer. The park seems like, the layout seems like it's a loop. So even if someone entered in, they could loop around. And I understand the comment of the neighbors right now. And I think just completing that entrance construction would help, would mediate that. That's my thought. Bigger signage, better.
I'll agree, that's what we're voting on now, 10-foot sign.
I mean,
and I
if
think
we were
that's,
if we were to put extra lights in, that would be an issue, I think, with light pollution with the neighbors. But just proposing bigger signage, I'm for it.
I think coming over the railroad there too, you're already slower driving.
I think that, this is just a zoning to clarify the colors, the height, which is increasing, which should help. The sign area, which increases, then it should help. But to Tom and Jim's point about people, I wonder if DOT, and this would be something that I think, to Angela's point, you'd have to reach out, but doesn't Pleasant Plains Drive end in it's a stub street, there's no way out. Right. So DOT should be able to put up a dead end, no outlet.
That's what I'm saying, that, if they say.
And I don't know the laws on, or the regulation on DOT signage, but typically on most dead end for wayfinding and EMS, there should be a sign there. So it might be something you could just call the DOT district office and say, can you relocate the sign there? And it might be that simple.
Bring that more forward. Yeah.
Or if there's one there, just move it to where it needs to.
Well, there's a connecting road. Okay, Pleasant Plains will go and then a turn right. So you'd have to put it post that next right turn. I'm not sure.
To the Meadowgate Drive, but which is also a dead end. I don't know the regulation because there's really no way out of either road. Yeah. But could be.
Good. Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning for Pleasant Park.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those who are in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose? Okay, here there are none. This passes unanimously.
So Tim, We're having trouble knowing who's doing the motion and the second. If you could repeat it when you're asking for a vote, that would be helpful.
Okay, so we had a motion by
Alyssa.
Alyssa. Okay. And we had a second
Stephen.
by Stephen. Okay. Okay, that brings us to item number 4. Joshua is going to present on the public hearing and possible motion regarding case 23C006, the Hunter Street Park Edition.
Alrighty, this is a rezoning case 23CZ06, which is located at 1250 Ambergate Station. This property is located on the northern edge of the downtown area, just beyond the current space that is Hunter Street Park. This area, the subject property is about 1.7 acres and is on the north end of town-owned property, which is Hunter Street Park, and south of the ample storage facility. The area is currently wooded on the western and eastern edges with the grassy area in the middle. The property is currently zoned PUD conditional zoning. The adjacent zonings to the north is light industrial. To the west is a mixture of high density, single family residential and office and institutional conditional use, which is this area here. To the south is the current Hunter Street Station, which is zoned as conservation buffer. And to the east is the PUD conditional zoning, and the space that is right here is the Thales Academy. The applicant is proposing to rezone this property to conservation buffer conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map indicates that this property is a park, public or private, and this rezoning to conservation buffer conditional zoning is consistent with that land use. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on February 10th, 2023, and a copy of that neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of zoning conditions and proposed uses is also in your staff report. The applicant is proposing an active park on this site, which they can explain further. I want to point out one specific zoning condition that is significantly above and beyond what the UDO requires, which is zoning condition number 2. The buffer along the northern property line shall be at least 10 feet wide. Where there is existing vegetation, it shall remain undisturbed except where invasive species will be removed. All areas with no existing vegetation and areas where invasive species are removed shall be planted to a 10-foot type A buffer standard. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on February the 16th, 2023. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are in your staff report and the applicant's response to each. They have added all 3 zoning conditions that were proposed. The 2045 land use map classifies the subject properties as park, public, or private. The proposed rezoning to conservation buffer conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will implement stricter environmental conditions than the UDO requires, update the zoning for this parcel to be consistent with other town parks, and will provide flexibility for the Town of Apex Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department to increase the services provided to residents. Planning staff recommends approval with the conditions offered by the applicant. If there's any questions, I can answer or I can defer to Angela.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. Are there any questions for Josh? Okay. At this point, we will open up the public comment. Would anybody in the public wish to speak on this rezoning? Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name is JP Brehony. It's Brehony. I live at 103 Tracy Creek Court in Salem Oaks. And I'm here with my lovely wife, Deva. We moved from Northern Virginia to Apex when I retired about 6 years ago, and we're very glad we did. It's a wonderful town. And I think we're the closest residential unit to this part of the park. And we use Hunter Station Park a lot I think it's a wonderful park. I'm a little past my prime in terms of the skateboarding, but my grandkids love it and I'll take their word for it. But we do use that trail and walk our dog around there a lot. The only two concerns we have are that this is going to be I don't know how you refer to it, as like a mountain bike training little pavilion. And if it has fence all around the rectangle of it, I would hope that the pedestrian access would be on the south side, like maybe one right behind right field and one right by the batting cage there behind left center, and nothing on the side where North Salem Street is. That area of North Salem Street, and I come out there with my vehicle a couple times a day, the cars really do go pretty quickly. I think especially because they're coming off Apex Peakway there. And on the Peakway, you have that, I guess, mile run between Harris Teeter and down by William Street. And the cars are always kind of speeding. So when they come up and they turn right on Salem Street, a lot of times they're going pretty quick. So if there was any kind of access where kids were bringing their bikes through or trying to cross that part of the road, that would be a serious problem. So our hope is that the whole thing has some kind of security fence. And like I said, that there could be 2 access points, one behind right field and one right by that batting cage there. Keep the kids off the road, if you see what I mean. So that's one concern. Our second concern is lighting. And if you look at the whole park, there's 2 types of lighting. On the soccer field itself and the softball field, there's, I guess you call it stadium lighting, the great big lights like at a football stadium. And the skateboard park itself has much softer lighting. It has maybe those 30-foot brown poles with the LED lights. So we're hoping that when this goes through the planning process, that the lighting that's going to be selected for this is almost going to be like the bookends, the same as the skateboard park, and those lights would be there. If they have if for any reason they had the stadium lights, it would, I think, be a little obtrusive to our house and all our neighbors' houses. So those are the big things I wanted to say about the lighting and about the pedestrian access in terms of safety. But thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the public wish to speak on this item? Okay, seeing there's none, I will close the public hearing and bring this back to the board. Could we understand a little bit more about the lighting and the pedestrian access? Just going through with my mind here, I'm not sure that really you could cross over with the railroad track being right there. I mean, is the only access point going to be off of?
So currently the plan is to develop this as a bike track. So a pump track and an outer circle sort of track for mountain bike training. So it's a 2 sort of part track. We don't have a design for it yet. We have concepts that were provided in the meetings. And at this point, we haven't made any plans for fencing it because the entire park is open to all the facilities. So we haven't looked at fencing. It wasn't sort of in the program that we had anticipated, nor is it a staffed facility with set hours of operation, partly because the park doesn't function that way as it is. And so we're not quite sure how we would close this section down when there's activity, for the rest of the time. So that's kind of where we are. I don't anticipate that we would be putting field lighting, 1, because it's extremely expensive, and 2, that type of lighting wouldn't be required for the type of use we're planning. But we have, we understand that concern. We're also hearing and have evaluated lighting at the skate plaza because there are people who have requested for it to be better lit. And so I know we've been looking at the lighting there, not with any immediate plans, or direction on what to do there, but to evaluate whether or not that lighting is sufficient, because that facility is programmed to be open 24 hours a day. And so you want enough lighting for it to be safe. But again, trying to balance how much of that impacts adjacent property owners. So we're in conceptual, you know, this is rezoning first step. The next step is to do site planning. That would involve public engagement, partly to understand what actual elements should be included here to accomplish what we're hoping for our interested bike riders. And so I think we can continue to develop that plan as we, you know, get direction from that process.
Okay, so what I'm hearing right now is we're not looking at lighting it, so.
We might have some lighting for safety. I mean, there is trees in the front area up here that we're gonna maintain. And so, you know, in a public space that's open, dark corners aren't desired. But to the extent of lighting, I don't anticipate it being the type that you have on ball fields.
Okay.
So I would see it some type of lighting for security at a minimum.
The buffers, could you go into the buffers a little bit as far as what currently we're looking at? And I understand JP's concern if maybe somebody wants to kind of jump the railroad tracks to enter the backside with their mountain bike, you know, what's going to deter them, but at the same time, we can't.
So the big aspect is what we're proposing on this section is a 50-foot buffer, maintaining the existing trees that are there and supplementing as needed. So we're doing 50-foot here. Right now, the path that's existing comes right up against the railroad right of way, and it kind of there's like a gravel path that I think some people use. We'd have to figure out whether or not we could, I mean, we'd have to fence the entire length of the property and potentially, I don't know what they have at the ample storage, be able to connect to that fence to be able to fence it all off. Because if we just fence this section, then we would still have open access that's available along the rest of the property. So it would require a fence the whole length, and I'd have to know for sure if ample storage has a fence, we'd have to be able to connect to that, otherwise there'd be a gap and somebody would just go to the space above it. They drive vehicles, CSX does, like pickup trucks and other equipment down in that area, so they do have sort of a gravel path that's outside of the park that's adjacent. A fence wouldn't stop people if they got to that side of it at Hunter Street from being able to travel up and cross at that point too. I know there was a driveway access here that's been removed. We had some conversations with runners who say they run up this path and cross here to go up North Salem. So, I mean, we're looking at the fencing would be a relationship of the entire site.
Sure.
And we're building more connectivity on street with the hopes that we're making the park access and bike ped more friendly for the entire park with some other like safe routes to school projects and some stuff that are building sidewalk on Ambergate Station and on Hunter Street as well. So hopefully creating more connectivity to provide alternate routes than making their own.
Thank you.
Sure.
May I speak briefly? I wasn't on the list. My name is Dava Brihoni.
Ma'am, we'll have to open up the.
Oh, have to open it up again?
Public comment, or
Can you do that?
we have already closed the public comment.
You've already closed it?
It's up to the chair.
Okay.
I'll open the public comment.
I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
And I honestly had not thought of this until I came to the meeting. I hadn't intended to say anything. But looking at this area now in comparison with the rest of the park, I'm just questioning honestly if 1.7 acres with a 10-foot buffer on each side of the vegetation, I don't know that that's large enough for a bike trail. That seems like a very small space to utilize as a bike trail. And it's smaller than the softball field. So that was just my comment, that it seems like if I were riding a bike, I'd want a bigger place to do it.
I think it goes in a circle though, so
Yeah.
Okay.
Teeny little circle.
I don't want to have a marital spat here, but I think it'll be fine.
It's a teeny circle.
Okay, we'll close down the public comment, bring it back here to the board. Thoughts?
I look forward to seeing a creative use of this space because right now it is void of anything exciting.
And most of our concerns seem to be in site plan layout, and here tonight we're here to rezone The site plan is not quite here yet, but I do think that whatever they use for this space for the town is going to be very much desired, whether it be this bike park or something else. Either way.
Yeah, I think just piggybacking off what you're saying, and to Mr. JP and his wife's concerns, I think, you know, the Apex process has public engagement throughout every step. So when you get into site planning, I think Angela and her team will be there to facilitate more concerns as we get through that process. So we got to get there. So we got to get through zoning first.
Very good. Sounds like a motion, Ryan.
I'll make a motion to approve Hunter Street Park as presented by staff, 23ZZ06.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ryan. Do we have a second?
Like second.
Okay, and we have a second here as well. Okay, Sarah. All right, all those who are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay. Okay, that ends our public hearing section of today's agenda. Moving on now to the new business. We'd like to move on to item number 1, back with Angela. And presentation and possible motion regarding the adoption of the master plan for parks, recreational, cultural resources, greenways, and open space master plan.
Yes. So this is the fun part. I'm thrilled to present.
I apologize. I'm sorry. There's a recusal here for Ryan Akers. Ryan, you're Mr. Popular. You won't be able to participate on the board if you're being recused every time. I'm just kidding. Okay, so we need a motion to recuse Mr. Ryan Akers.
I'll make a motion to use Mr. Akers.
I'll second that, Alyssa.
Okay, so Alyssa and Keith. All right, all who's in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, you are now recused, Mr. Akers. And all kidding. Angela, my apologies. You have the floor.
No worries. No. This is the fun part. So I'm thrilled to present the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space. The master plan is the product of nearly 2 years of research, public input, and engagement. The Parks and Recreation Cultural Resources Department is excited for our future and opportunities for town residents. I'd like to introduce Shweta Nanakar, the project manager with McAdams Company, to present the summary of our master plan.
Thank you, Angela. Right, good evening, everyone. It's my immense pleasure to be here today to present the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space. We would like to request a recommendation of support for the adoption of the master plan for the 2023-2033 planning horizon. The town of Apex initiated the planning process to get a deeper understanding into the current state of recreation system in 2021-22. This process involved several milestones through which the department noted gaps, uncharted opportunities, and set up aspirational goals to be achieved over the next 10 years. The planning process identified 9 goals to be achieved through the master plan. Besides guiding the vision and the development of the parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenway system, the plan provides a framework for the staff, elected officials, and the community to make informed decisions about the growth of the system to respond to the needs and desires of the changing and growing community. Furthermore, assessing demographic shifts, recreation trends, current needs, and projected needs for future recreation set the framework to develop an implementation and action plan that aligns with the game plan Apex and in turn can help the town qualify for accessing certain funding resources. The project team conducted site visits to existing parks and greenways, reviewed the previous planning efforts, and conducted a thorough inventory and assessment of the current system. Earlier in this meeting, you reviewed the amendments that were a product of the master plan's recommendation. The town has an evolving and expanding greenway system of 25 miles scheduled to, on the ground. Over 6 miles have been constructed by subdivision developers, and an additional 4+ miles scheduled to start construction in the coming year that is funded by the town, county, and federal grants. New design standards are being implemented on the newer sections of the greenways to develop a consistent and cohesive greenway system. Town of Apex has high-quality parks distributed across the geographic extents of the town. These parks are well loved by the community for their unique amenities, highlighting the need for renovations, improvements, to continue to provide high-quality experiences for the residents. As the town continues to grow, the department has been proactive in acquiring future parkland to meet the demands of the new residents. Town of Apex has a community center, a historic cultural arts center, and a new senior center for indoor recreation offerings. These centers provide diverse program offerings for Apex residents. With the shift of much of the recreation programming for seniors to the senior center, there is an opportunity to expand additional programs for other interests and age groups at the community center. The planning process included a robust community engagement from structured open houses, special events, online surveys, focus groups, public input meetings, as well as administering a scientific survey to make sure diversity of voices within the community are heard. The process included more than 1,800 touch points with the community. The community engagement efforts, work sessions with the staff, advisory commission, and the town council revealed consistent themes that inform the guiding principles of this plan. The visioning sessions founded the basis for recommendations and action items by discussing big ideas, challenges, and strategies to remediate those challenges. The 3 overarching themes that emerge from the planning process are expand, experience, and excel. The total 9 guiding principles that are developed through this process fall under these 3 themes. Under the expand theme, we have connectivity, recreation offerings, culture of belonging, and environmental stewardship. With the growing population comes the demand and need for additional parks and recreation programs. The Apex community also expressed a strong desire for expanding Greenway network, committing to the environmental sustainability initiatives, and strengthening the culture of belonging. Under experience, we have health and well-being, sense of community, and unique to Apex. Apex community wants to experience amenities and programs that are unique to Apex, that celebrate Apex's culture and history and brings the community together. And under Excel, we have operations efficiency and customer service. The Parks and Recreation Cultural Resources Department wants to achieve operational efficiencies as it continues to evolve and provide excellent customer service. The 3 major areas of recommendations which will transform the scene of recreation in Apex include greenways, future parkland, and recreation programming. The action items for these projects will range from design and construction of greenway corridors, master plan for new parks in Western Apex, feasibility and design of new indoor recreation facilities, to developing new environmental sustainability initiatives, policies for program fee structure, and volunteer programs for the department. Expanding greenway connectivity emerged as the topmost desire in almost all of our community engagement touchpoints, with consensus across staff, advisory board members, and the town council. A newly developed prioritization tool identified corridors that need to be at the top of this list to leverage meeting the needs of Apex residents while also providing multitude of benefits of connectivity within our community, and the matrix will be used to continue the efforts of expansion of the system throughout the town. Specific bike ped amendments were presented by the staff earlier in tonight's meeting, which align with the recommendations of Bike Apex, along with those which scored the highest in our prioritization matrix. Developing and expanding current parks amenities and programs for a growing population is an important consideration of this plan. The project team identified geographic gaps in the growing areas of the town where there will be a need for new parks and indoor facilities. At the end of 10-year lifetime of this project, the town will see significant additions to the park system, including master plans for the new 2 acquired properties in the Western Apex and new indoor recreation facilities. These spaces could potentially include new outdoor classrooms for nature-based programs, multi-sport courts, multifunctional large open spaces, and community gardens. Staff will be presenting location-specific parks and indoor facility search areas as separate presentation at tonight's meeting. Last but not the least, residents will get to experience the development of new recreation and cultural resources programs or the adoption of the existing ones that tie in with the guiding principles of this plan, offering multiple benefits such as programs for all age groups and ability levels, as well as interest levels that promote a sense of community, offers active lifestyle, and educate the younger generation about taking care of our natural resources. The plan recommendations also identify the need for additional staffing with a focus on partnerships and volunteerism. More than 30 recommendations and 150 action items are included in the implementation and action plan that align under the 9 guiding principles. The implementation plan includes prioritization guidelines along with 4 pathways to implement these action items. Over the course of 10 years, the guiding principles will remain as they are rooted in the community values. While the action items may change, priorities may shift, and new funding sources may become available. On an annual basis, PRCR staff will utilize the implementation and action plan in tandem with the game plan Apex to guide their work plan, setting attainable goals and developing a budget that results in measurable outcomes and clearly identifying the accomplishments and the challenges while responding to resident input and needs assessment in an adaptive and responsive manner. Angela?
So, the Master Plan for Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources, Greenways, and Open Space aims to expand the opportunities for parks, recreation, and cultural amenities and programming for the entire Apex community. Starting with the reality-based planning approach, the proposed master plan provides a balance of the current needs and desires of our residents with visionary and aspirational goals aligning with Game Plan Apex. As the town continues to grow, it must proactively plan to ensure the needs of the community will be met. Strategic planning that involves appropriate staffing, allocation, funding resources, and effective business decisions will be required to implement the recommendations and action items of this plan. Systematic and annual assessments of current recreation and culture offerings, asset management, and best management practices ensure sound operations will allow the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department to meet the demands of the community. Continued collaboration with other town departments, adjacent jurisdictions, Wake County, local businesses, special interest groups, and third-party recreation providers will be critical to serve the community. The department, with support from town leadership, will require focus on its aspirational goals, which will be achieved through visionary decisions, innovative actions, and measured risk-taking to support our motto, the peak of good living. Staff is recommending adoption of the Master Plan for Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources, Greenways, and Open Space. The Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources Advisory Commission unanimously recommended adoption of the Master Plan at their November 30th, 2022 meeting, and we are interested in answering any questions that you might have or taking any comments that will be shared with Town Council.
Okay, thank you, Angela and Shweta. Okay. Any questions? I will say this. Can you break it down? There's a lot going on there. And I'm just kind of, looking through different things, and I talk about priority investment rating for facilities and other things. Are these things that we are looking at putting money towards as the town, or is this more kind of a business development of things we want to see in our town?
You want me to go? Sure. So the master plan is what our department used to guide most decisions that we make. But as we've grown, what we found sometimes is it's difficult to say the plan says we should do this without us really taking a step annually and assessing what residents want, what are the trends, what programs are operating at capacity, where do we need more facility space, where do we spend our money. So this plan was created in a way that makes it more adaptive than our plans in the past. But the key components that really are decisions sort of made are the Greenway plan, because it shows alignments in target areas, and the next piece that you'll see tonight, which is these land areas for future parks and or indoor facility space. And so we're starting to get to the place where we're capped out on a lot of what we can offer. We're growing enough that we have programming like full day camps that have been requested that we don't offer. And so evaluating all of these things annually, seeing what's being successful, looking for funding alternatives is what this plan spells out. But it's been done with comparing us to national trends, level of service that our National Parks Association sets up, looking at how we compare with peer. So it's truly like our strategic plan in a way that we've never had one before. At the same time, you hear us talking about Game Plan Apex. So the town has initiated a strategic planning effort, and we made sure that those two plans link together. And so everything that we have as a goal in our strategic plan aligns directly with something that's been an idea or a policy or a concept that comes out of the master plan. So each year we do that budget cycle, we'll be able to look at where our needs are, where we're deficient, what our demand is, what populations need different types of programming space, and then accomplish that through an annual analysis versus saying it's 10 years and at year 9 we need to do this. Every year we're going to look at all of those ideas and say, well, what's rising to the top as an immediate need?
And how do we reach out? Because it sounds like we're looking at keeping our finger on the pulse being the general public and kind of what their wishes and desires are within their own community. And that's kind of where we're looking at maybe trying to focus on certain programs or certain facilities to meet needs of whatever it may be. How are we actually touching these people? How are we getting their direct feedback and response to items that they wish they could see?
So some of what we have is residents who contact us about things that they can't do that we don't offer. The other is residents that are in programs we can track. You know, if a new program starts, is it at the beginning of its life cycle, meaning more people are wanting to come to it, so we should expand? Is it at capacity and staying level, so we can operate it as it is, or is it declining and we need to look at it as can we upfit it to something new? Can we change the parameters?
I like tennis courts to pickleball. Or
Right. And a lot of times that's a good point that we have is there's a lot of people who will easily come out and say, well, you can put so many pickleball courts on a tennis court, and there's a high demand for pickleball right now. But we don't want to lose any amenities where we've been providing tennis and it's a stable tennis, use, and we don't want to take that away and then be deficient because we've met another need. So a lot of what this plan in its holistic approach is that it provides adaptive space. And so a lot of the concepts that we've talked about are, do we have a court that can be used as multifunctional? And one of the things that we're getting ready to kick off this year is building 2 street hockey rinks with the Carolina Hurricanes as a partnership, and then having futsal and basketball on them. So it can be utilized, it can be programmed for different, but it lets us introduce something we don't have today, and then sort of finding if there's a really strong need, then we can build one of those as another. Or do we put a big open field area that could be a rentable open play lawn? Could it also convert to a cricket court? Could it also be marked for, other types of fields? So we're really trying to stretch that adaptive use of indoor and outdoor space long term. So that's what this plan, gives us in the nuts and bolts of it, is the ability to reach out either as people contact us or as we see a demand, or we go to a conference and we see a new trend. A lot of people wanted bicycle at the skate plaza, but it wasn't designed to handle that type of equipment because it damages that type of concrete. So this bike track on the north end of the park for us, like, is a way to accomplish that. But you're right, it's not big enough for mountain biking, but it can be mountain bike, like, component training. So yes, you're not riding 10 miles, but you're riding a loop of all different, like, obstacles. And so it's adaptive, meaning you would ride your bike here, do the training on those components, and ride back. You get the same day worth of riding, but it's done in pieces, and maybe you can do that one night, but then on the weekend you could go to the mountains and actually ride, but you'd have practiced on those components.
Sure.
So we're trying to think of outside the box, and most of the feedback we got was people really like that we have, like, the Elevate fitness course, that we have the skate plaza, you know, that we're going to have a cross-country course that the schools can use. So we're trying to find ways to fit ourselves into the traditional markets, but where can we add pieces that make us more adaptive and able to change with trends and offer things that others are not. So
It's very good.
As part of the plan, does it look at facilities and trends of certain types of facilities or venues to drive revenue for regional type tournaments?
So revenue generation on a whole is something we haven't really done a lot of, and it's definitely something that's, you know, how do we fund, you know, ourselves, our programs, our facilities, renovations of facilities. And so that is something that comes into studying, you know, whether it's indoor, outdoor, you know, even like Town of Cary is doing an e-game facility. It's like, is that the trend, and who offers it nearby? And is it somebody we partner with? Do we rent space and not build our own? So there's, you know, we're definitely reaching to the full range of what those opportunities are. But as revenue generation as a concept, it's in the plan. It's just not specific to, is it outdoor athletic? You know, there's a lot of that's around. There's a demand for more, but is there something like this street hockey facility? The Hurricanes are working with the NHL to offer this opportunity. They looked around the area and came to us. We presented a site. We were like on board to do it. And then they want to take that and prototype it and spread it around the region so they could have bigger ball hockey tournaments, something I didn't know anything about. But, you know, that's sort of, those could generate revenue in the sense of bringing not only people who might rent the space and utilize it, but people who would come to stay for a weekend. If there were 3 or 4 of those, either within our municipality or in adjacent municipalities, you'd have a tournament weekend. And we were looking we've talked to Town of Cary and Holly Springs about, as Pleasant Park opens, we have opportunities to bring in larger events once or twice a year that utilize the facilities of all 3 towns together, or maybe even down to Fuquay. So we'd have this corridor, Western Wake County, that could, you know, bring people to stay and eat and do all of their activities in this part of the county. So we're definitely trying to reach to that potential, what it looks like, you know, that's what we need to get to.
The same time you're looking at new proposed places, facilities, or properties, are you looking at existing facilities and assessing them as well?
Yes. So we've started doing, like, our first greenways that were built in the town are hitting 20 years old, 22 years old. And so now we're also evaluating, like, existing conditions and what we need to do to upgrade those to our new standards. We're looking at our indoor space. I mean, the gyms over next door were not built to have pickleball, but we've got them now. We can have 4 indoor pickleball courts at one time.
I didn't know what pickleball was, so I had to look it up.
So, you know, it's something that wasn't even, you know, a word when the building was originally constructed. It's the same thing as our senior center provides adaptive opportunities of what can we use the same space for. And so we have these multifunctional rooms that can be small rooms, can be dance classrooms, can be meeting space. And so we're really, I mean, I think in that sense, what we hear is we're probably, maybe we don't have the full range of it because we don't have a lot of space available, in that it's utilized most hours of the day, but what can we do to take the next step? When we build the next building, what would that be? The Pleasant Park Fieldhouse has locker rooms that are adaptive classrooms that can be HOA meeting spaces, that can be camp day classrooms. And so that building would not potentially sit still because it's waiting for the 2 hours of a day that you might utilize it. So that's kind of the program that we're moving to. And, you know, we got a lot of feedback about that kind of interest of, well, I don't do that sport or I don't do those activities. I would like this. Well, we've tried to figure out how to make those things happen.
I do have two pieces of feedback. One comes from my previous experience as a public employee who sat through many, many strategic and master planning processes. The current one is 150 pages. This one is 50 pages. And I think that makes it so much more usable. And when people see a 150-page master plan, it sits on a shelf. And this one has, I love the scorecard that you have, the implementation. It makes it very actionable. There's a lot of accountability, like you said, with annual updates. It's a great guide for your programming. So I applaud that structure.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion to recommend support of adopting the proposed master plan.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alyssa and a second by Keith. Any other discussion? Okay, all those who approve, say aye. Aye. All those who oppose? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, you're going to stay up there one more time. All right, this brings us to new business, item number 2. Angela, again, presentation, possible motion regarding the Town of Apex Master Plan for Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources. And we're going to maintain that recusal of Mr. Akers as well. Okay, Ms. Angela again.
All right. So staff is requesting consideration and a recommendation to remove and amend areas identified for parkland acquisition that were previously adopted in the 2014 master plan, along with addition of areas identified as being needed for indoor recreation facilities as a result of the public engagement and input that has been identified in the recommendation and implementation plan concurrent with the adoption of the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space. We're calling it the master plan, but it's got all those ideas in it. This map shows the 3 amendments staff is recommending to the master plan map. The current map shows 5 land dedication boundaries. They're sort of highlighted here, red outline, light green, that we currently work off of. The first amendment is to remove those identified areas. And then in addition, this map, just to give you the overview, shows the other 2 areas that we're going to itemize one by one and request that they be added. So the first amendment we're looking at is deleting the current land dedication boundaries that are identified on our map. And now we'll go through the individual additions. So Amendment 2A is an area generally located adjacent and east of the future Wimberley Road Parkland. It's east of Green Level Church Road, north of Jenks Road, and south of White Oak Creek. So again, this is an area that as development would come in, or if we have funding available to purchase additional acreage to grow our park system, that could be active parkland, it could be passive parkland, it could be conservation land. So it's not necessarily, you know, the idea of just simple outdoor athletic recreation, but numerous types of things that it could cover. This area also identifies area adjacent to the park, so it touches on a property that's directly adjacent to future land that we already own for a park, but also gives us the opportunity to expand off of Green Level Church Road with a park facility. The second addition is an area generally located south of Highway 64, crossing the American Tobacco Trail and Olive Chapel Road, east of the Wake-Chatham County line. So most of this circle is sort of identifying Jordan Lake watershed protected land. There is some development in this area, but you know, our goal is to look for something that could provide maybe a place where the greenway would connect to parkland in that area. The third amendment is to add park generally located at the intersection of Hume Olive Road and New Hill Olive Chapel Road, west of the future Olive Farm Park. So while it could, I mean, there's a development that's already planned in this area, so it would be looking at something around that general location of the activity center that we talked about earlier with the plan amendment, and out along Barker Road out towards the lake. The next amendment is an area generally located along Old US 1 CSX rail corridor and south to US 1 Highway 1. It's east of the New Hill Holloman Road and west of Friendship Road. Also in the northern portion of this is an area that's designated future land use park, public or private, with the concept of that area being a linear park with a street side greenway located within it. So one is potentially acquiring that parkland along the CSX rail corridor. The other is looking at potential of a park that could be off of the Richardson Road extension or somewhere between. Pleasant Park is just up here to the north. The next amendment is the area generally located within the Viridia SD plan area, south of US Highway 1 and east of NC 540, west of Highway 55. So the Viridia SD plan does have a provision for being required to provide parkland within the project. So that's sort of a known. We don't know exactly where it will be within their project boundaries, but it was a part of their rezoning when that was done. But with the amount of population growth in this area and the fact that it's sort of land or road locked between the three highways, this is an area we've been looking at for quite a long time for parkland, and it's just been concentrated more than the old boundary, which is, you can see, is sort of surrounding this and further areas. And then the next is an area generally located north and west of the future Fenton Grove High School, southeast of Lufkin Road Middle School, and south of 1010 Road. So this is sort of the end of the Town of Apex corporate ETJ, I guess not all corporate limits yet. There is also the Knights Play site is designated on the future land use plan as park, public or private. The thought has always been if that were no longer to be operated as Knights Play Golf Course, it would be a shame to lose that open space and recreation area, even if we could capture some of it for a park, if it were there was an attempt to redevelop it, as well as looking at other areas that would connect along this part of the future expansion of the town boundaries. And then the last is an area generally south and west of Salem Elementary School, east of North Beaver Creek Greenway, and north of Highway 64. One of the things that we did look at as a part of the location of future land use is areas that are bound by roads that don't necessarily have easy access, where you would have to drive outside onto a major road network to get to a park space. And while the Salem Pond Park is located just at the edge of this, that park is pretty much developed and has 2 ponds on it, so it's not got really any more space other than trail improvement to provide additional recreation, either passive or active. And so this area has been a location that we've been sort of tracking for potential parkland. All right, and the next set of amendments identify addition of search areas for 4 future indoor recreation facilities. Just to be clear, recreation indoor is not necessarily a gym. It could be classroom space, it could be adaptable indoor space, but some type of facility that would allow indoor activities of any type to occur that we would offer, whether cultural, recreational, of all ages and abilities. The first area is generally located within property identified as future Wimberley Road Parkland on the east side of Wimberley Road, north of Jenks Road, and south of Green Level West Road. We've acquired a little over 30 acres here, overlapping with the land interest to the east. This is just identifying that park corner of the town would be a good location for indoor recreation. The area generally located within the Apex Nature Park at 2600 Evans Road. It has long been on our plans to have an environmental education center on this property, and the need for that and identifying Environmental facility was something that we heard a lot during that process, and we've heard from our town council the interest in that type of program, whether or not it ended up in the park. And there are some large undeveloped lots. This large one here actually has a lot of environmentally sensitive property on it. Not a lot of it's developable, so that could also be a good site. So we've kind of targeted that area to be near our nature park or some property close to that. The next is an area generally located within property identified as the future Olive Farm Park near the intersection of Olive Farm Road and Hume Olive Road. At this point, we have about 20 acres where there's a dedication that's going to happen of 3 acres to the south. There are several properties off of the road, Hume Olive and Olive Farm Road, that have single-family home sites on them that we've talked to the owners about purchasing. But the idea is that a recreation center would be easy to support on this side of town. So we're looking at our park property and anything else that might be in adjacent to that. And then the last is an area generally located within the Viridia SD Plan area south of US Highway 1, west of Highway 55, East William Street, and north and east of NC 540 as identified in the Viridia SD Plan. Again, the Viridia SD Plan included a provision for a indoor recreation facility, approximately 22,500 square feet, similar to what the first phase of this, our community center was next door before the addition. And so providing for that is within their project's approvals. And so, you know, we've kind of just identified it central to their project boundaries, but that is something that's a part of that project and would provide recreation facilities south of US 1, which we do not have at this time. So the Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources Advisory Commission recommended approval of these amendments at the April 26, 2023 meeting. There was not a unanimous vote for all recommendations. The amendment to remove 5 existing land acquisition areas passed 3-2. The dissenting votes were concerned about the reduction in specifically targeted areas that were proposed. The 7 amendments which located future parkland search areas passed 4-1. The same concerns about reducing the search areas and targeting individual properties versus wider range of possible land opportunities was discussed. The 4 amendments which located future indoor recreation facility search areas passed unanimously. Staff recommends the proposed amendments, including the removal and relocation of areas identified for parkland acquisition and the addition of areas identified as being needed for indoor recreation facilities, concurrent with the adoption of the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space. I can answer any questions.
Once in the scenario the town council sees this, approves, will this map reflect the changes we recommended earlier in the overall pedestrian plan? So would the 14 changes we went through are not on this map?
Right. The 14 changes are not on this map, but those amendments, and if these were adopted, those will be our new master plan map. So it will identify greenways, side paths, land acquisition, and indoor facility. And that's what the map would show.
How does this work with the future land use maps, being that some of these areas are looked at by the town as maybe being some areas high density housing or commercial, and then now we're looking at potentially now changing that to park?
So the existing boundaries functioned in the same way. When a project was presented for rezoning and they were proposing residential development, we look at that property based on project specific criteria. What are they proposing? What type of residential unit? What's the number of units within that project? If it's within the land use or land dedication boundary on a map, we then evaluate whether or not the amount of acreage that would be required if they were just to do a land dedication is of a size, shape, location that would work for the types of programming space that we need. There are conditions that are legislated by the state that tell us what the property, what can be and can't not be counted, how much we can ask for. All of that is provided to us through legislation. It's written into the UDO specifically, and so we evaluated on those criteria. Not every property that is redeveloped or developed as residential within a land dedication boundary on our current map was required to do dedication. If they don't, or we don't recommend it, then they do a fee in lieu instead. If there's greenway within that property, then they can use greenway construction for credit against those fees. And so this doesn't change any of that. This just defines the locations in different places than they were on the map before. And so instead of having 5 larger areas, we now have 7 smaller areas. And some of that is because development has occurred, and so the boundary is not as relevant or doesn't provide really opportunities, maybe as many opportunities as it would have, you know, in 2014. So it's kind of, some of that's why it shrunk, some of it's because the area was designated as industrial, and we anticipate that that's probably, you know, a goal or objective is to have more non-residential development, and so we just tried to balance all of those things against each other.
Out of curiosity, has there been a conversation with Wake County Public School System? Because often parks are in near vicinity of schools, so any future school planning, has that been considered?
So we do work closely with the Wake County Public Schools real estate staff, and their folks that do their safe routes to school and you know, a lot of the greenway planning that we do. If it's nearby a school site, we try to provide access. We have sites that we do what we call level 4 user agreements, where they have facilities on their campus and we maintain them to have the ability to use them. And there's a, you know, fee and a contract that's developed on a timeline for when we can use it and what we can use it for. But usually on those sites, we maintain like the athletic fields for the school, and then we have use of them after school hours. We have some sites where we use the indoor basketball courts because we don't have enough space to run our program. So they do, we have those kind of agreements. Interior. We do know of several of their new sites. Their programming of their sites is very tight in that there isn't a lot of extra land on their campuses to, you know, to develop anything else. But we've presented some sites that we knew of that could be good school sites. As property was discussed, maybe we looked at it for a park, but that's not where we really want to be, and the owner is interested in doing something that's not like a traditional residential development. Maybe they want it to be more open space, or they like children and they want them to be there to play. So we've introduced properties to the schools. Some of them they have actually purchased, and we're, you know, in communication. Do we have a plan to do, Wake County used to do school park partnerships. They are not in that business per se anymore, where they have a county park with a county school. That's how we got Salem Pond, was that they were removing themselves from maintaining parks, you know, adjacent to school campuses. But I think we have a good relationship in trying to find, you know, things that, you know, benefit or that we can share.
Great.
I have 3 questions. Using Viridia as an example, if the indoor area were to like move within the cell, like I see that as the nucleus of the cell, is that something that has to go back in front of like the board or council, or is that generally where you would be identifying an indoor search area?
In this, it was central to the overall project boundary. They picked like the center of the project because we knew that it was a condition of their development. Does it have to be in exactly that location? No, because that in that case specifically, we're pretty sure it's not in that exact location.
So it's not huge deals
No.
generally. These are generalities kind of.
I mean, they're a starting point for us to target, and in a case of a project that's as large as Verdia is, you know, moving 300 feet to the left is not going to be an issue, because we know it's within the overall. The other sites, it's a little bit more targeted in, I mean, we're on, the indoor facilities are all sort of in known places right now. 2 of our own
Yeah, that
parks.
was one of my questions. Like
Yeah.
Wimberley, like you guys own most everything. I said
Right.
if the town owns most of those properties. So you're just saying I'm identifying those town-owned properties as properties we should put indoor.
We know
with
we have a need to balance out sites around town. The one was, first we acquired the land because we didn't have anything northwest, southwest. This is sort of goes to southeast, but so that's the starting point. And we figure that those, I mean, we already know we're at a capacity at indoor space, but it doesn't preclude us from looking, and I say this with an industrial area, there are a lot of indoor volleyball, basketball gymnasiums that are industrial park facilities. You know, you could have a ropes course or a rock climbing facility that was, you know, that the town operated, and it might be in more of an industrial area because, you know, it would be built more of a warehouse facility. So we're not tied to being within a park, but we also, you know, we know that those are areas that would spread that out across the town. So
my third question, staying on the Verdia example, I'm going to use a highly technical term here. What if that land was worth $1 gajillion and we now say, all right, well, we want parkland there. Does that detract from the $1 gajillion that the landowner would potentially get for the property, or would the impact fee that you mentioned before, would that offset, you know, whatever the town would dilute for, I think, you know, high density or, you know, something very, very dense, high value? Like park would be watering it down. Does that detract from the valuation for the landowner that's selling it, or is this just, I'm trying to understand, is this like these areas that are identified, do they negatively impact the people trying to sell the property?
So there's probably 2 ways of looking at it. We've had properties that we've acquired solely because the existing owner does not, they have a pond and they have a beautiful view and they imagine it staying like that. And so they want to sell to know that the property would be maintained as it is. So that seller their goal is to get what they feel good about getting out of it when they sell it, meaning they want it to be a price that they agree to sell it for. Having these boundary areas, one is just it's a general focus of this is where we need space to fulfill the demand as the area grows. And some of that looks at what's the future land use and what could the density of development be in that if it was residential. We don't, our land dedication ordinance doesn't apply to anything but residential development. Mixed use that has residential, it applies to, but not if this were a whole commercial corridor and somebody were getting commercial development dollars to sell, we wouldn't be in that same place because they wouldn't be required to evaluate land dedication. The properties that can develop at higher densities would be required to dedicate more property because it's a per unit calculation. So and there's 3 levels of calculations that have different quantities of value. So single family, you dedicate 1/30 of an acre per unit. Single family attached is 1/45 of an acre per unit, and multifamily is 1/51. And the fee rate is based that the single family is higher and then it goes down. So the more units on a higher density, you dedicate less and pay less, but you can get more on the land. And so it should equal somewhat close to the same dollar value. Our ordinance is set up. We have a fee study that establishes what that value is for. And so this is the start of that conversation. Land dedication is the first look. That's what the ordinance directs us. You know, are you dedicating land? And if not, will you pay a fee in lieu? And so in some ways they're equal unless the amount that they're paying and can develop ends up being substantially different. But then the ordinance has a provision that if the value of the land is much less than what we're charging, you can do an appraisal and we will evaluate that and your fees could change. And so at the same time, if you're buying land for much less and you dedicate land, then you're not paying as much as you would with paying a fee. So there's a balance of that. The Villages of Apex, because you can see it right here, they dedicated and built the park, the Hunter Street Park, the first part of it. And so we knew we had a need. They did a land dedication, but they also used the offset of, they had so many units that there was a fee in addition to the land dedication. So, you know, we try to balance what's best for everybody, but it's also usually considered an amenity within a development that's in addition to what they might provide as, you know, neighborhood recreation for the residents only versus us, you know, offering an additional amenity. So I think depending on how people value those things and what their product is that they want to put on the market, you know, there's a balance of, you know, it might be a little bit better, but I don't think that there's a substantial loss from what we can tell, because the amenity itself brings value to their project.
Very good. Are there any other questions? Okay. All right. Discussion?
I am concerned with the neighborhood and other properties. I'm going to be honest with you. I understand there's been a lot of thought into this, and it is very well thought out, and I applaud that. But the indoor just seems to be, you know, like 5 or 6 properties, 8 properties. You know, it's just has narrowed it down to where those landowners, I guess it was just the same, but when they go to develop, they can still do a fee in lieu? Or is it the same as if it wasn't there?
So the indoor areas is sort of an additional tag. It wouldn't fall under land dedication, and I mean, it does in a way, but it's within the land dedication that we would also be targeting more of that specific facility, whereas the land dedication ordinance is land for recreation. The indoor recreation facility area is a target to try to identify where, if we build another facility, where do those go? We don't know what they would look like. So again, that was the premise of the indoor facilities don't mean necessarily a gym, or it could be any number of types. It could be an environmental education, it could be indoor active recreation, it could be pottery classrooms, art studios. So the broad range of that is that, but we know that we're at capacity in these buildings here. And so if we want to offer and not have wait lists and be able to offer different types of program, we've got to have indoor space. The Verdia project has a requirement of their rezoning to provide indoor space. So this one, where it's located, is less, you know, sort of critical, but that we identify it because it follows a plan that's already been approved. The other 4 indoor facilities all at least have a portion of them located over an existing park. The idea is that's probably the first place it could be. But if there's an opportunity adjacent to the park to acquire more property, even if it's us purchasing it, there's a rationale behind why we're doing that. We're saying, we know we have parkland here, but if we could buy 5 acres and build the building there, we would still have the park land available to use for other purposes. So that sort of gives us the broader look of saying, not just within the park, but maybe expanding this future park, because there are undeveloped properties or single lots or vacant lots adjacent to the park lands that we don't have developed at this time. And so we didn't want to stop ourselves from being able to grow those facilities, both indoor and with, you know, outdoor opportunities.
Okay, well, like on the Wimberley, as you were discussing, Ryan, you know, they own a lot of that land already. not the case in other areas. But that was just my only concerns. That was a concern that I had.
I guess at this point, what we're doing is just kind of narrowing down the search. I mean, the plan already exists, right? So we're just kind of redefining the areas, and some of the areas which probably were inside the circle are now development of some other means, which now puts those uses outside of what could have been used for. So now we're just kind of narrowing down the search. The problem that becomes is if the plan stays there long enough and development continues to occur, eventually you have such a narrowed space that I don't want this to become discriminatory against those who own the property, that the town only wants this certain type thing, then making their property value less, which I don't think that hopefully the town will never do such thing. But when you narrow the scope so much, does it then become a negative to the property owner, potentially? Yes, ma'am.
I'll just add to that a little bit. The exercise that we did here about the identifying the geographic gaps, this is solely GIS exercise to figure out where the town has currently grown, where the infrastructure is, where people can access parkland and open spaces within 10-minute walk, within 5-minute drive. And then mapping them geographically gave us the idea of where there are gaps where people cannot access these parks within 10-minute walk or within 5 minutes of drive. And then we also identified socially vulnerable areas within Apex where you have minority population or where you have racial or socioeconomic population that needs parks within their close areas. And so overlapping all of these through GIS, that's where we narrowed down those areas where there is real need for parkland. So that's why those larger circles that you see have kind of shrunk down, because those are the real gaps that we currently have in the system. Does that help?
Sure.
So how were they defined prior to this survey? Was it similar or
in the
just
previous plan? I think they were based on where the town hall complex is, and then as the town continued to grow in 4 directions, they identified those large circles in 4 pockets, like 4
outliers.
quadrants.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this is more of a
We
strategic
went a little
focus.
bit further in our approach to identify like narrowed down gaps.
They were on the peripheral of development.
Gotcha.
We had a northeast, I mean, and this covered, half of this is in Cary jurisdiction, but it was just a big circle. Northwest, which was until the last, 5 to 7 years, was outside of area heavily developed. Southwest, and then this southeast. So for the most part, you've had the core of Apex in 2013 when that plan was implemented. That was where the development was going to go, because it was the underdeveloped or less developed edges of where Apex residents at the time lived.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, is there a motion to have? We need to move this one along one way or the other.
We're doing all of these separately, like they were discussing in the beginning, or we're doing this all in one? Like when you, at the end of your thing, you had it where they had voted separately.
Right. We always offer, there's 3 recommendations here. And so they took the advisory commission did them as 3 separate. The only thing I would sort of make a comment on is, without knowing, I wouldn't delete, or, I mean, I would have a discussion about whether or not there's a interest, I wouldn't delete our land dedication areas without, make a recommendation for that without us having something to put back. It would be there to keep that, because we wouldn't want to not have an area.
Oh, I understand.
So,
And we need the areas.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I agree we do. Just a little, and just to clarify, the designated areas, for instance, whatever they were developing, would it be required for the indoor space or to sell land for the indoor space, or that would just be a recommendation? I'm just trying to clarify along your concerns. Is it, are we
so it's not, in all cases, I think maybe this clarifies. These are target areas where we are focusing our look. And so these also could be directives for staff if we have an opportunity to buy land or get funding that we can use to protect a piece of property that has something significant that we'd like to see saved. I'll use beech trees as an example. If we found an area, they're not very common, that they're really large, to save beech trees, and somebody brought it to our attention, if it were outside of one of these areas, we'd still probably pursue it. But we'd have a stronger case in saying, well, that area is also within one of these boundaries, and we knew that we were trying to find park space in that area. So it's a guide. It's sort of our first look and the first point of discussion when a project comes in for rezoning, and you hear that, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission made a recommendation for fee in lieu that comes from them through a rezoning. A lot of times those are parcels that are within these land dedication boundaries as they are, meaning when it's so broad for us that it's on the very left-hand corner, and we've started to acquire parkland on the bottom right-hand corner of a big circle, we're saying, well, there's a park now within a planned park within that drive in that time. We won't do one, or we won't do one right across the street for 1 acre when we've got 12 acres on this side. So we're always evaluating each project independently. That's a target. That's a place for us to look to fill a gap. But it might be that it's, a little north or a little south, or it could be, 5 miles away that we hit an area that's not on this, but that makes sense because it's a piece that comes in and they have a parcel that makes sense to do as land dedication. But we always discuss that with an applicant, and if we asked for it and it was recommended as land dedication and the applicant said they were not interested, you would hear that as the rezoning case, and it would go to council as a place where we don't agree, and then ultimately that would be a point, one of the things that they decide, just like other conditions that are not always, we all like to have them all be on the same page, but if someone wasn't, there's a mechanism for them to express why they don't want to, or what the value of it is, and what, they can also do offsite. So if someone were saying we want to do offsite dedication, we have this parcel that's in your boundary, but we're here, they could do that as well. So, it definitely gives us, it's just it's a target to start our discussion. And that's the first point that we bring to people if they bring in a project in those boundaries, is to say, well, it's in a land dedication boundary area. What are you proposing? And do you see, would you offer dedication, or, are you looking for a fee in lieu? How many units? And when it doesn't make sense, we're not trying to add 3/8 of an acre here and a quarter over there. Because that would mean us trying to maintain traveling to and having staff and figuring out, we'd rather assemble a larger piece.
So are the boundaries of these blue circles, are they flexible?
Like I said, we had this boundary that's here used to be over and covered Pleasant Park, but once we acquired Pleasant Park, we made a map amendment and shifted it west. And in the middle of it, or over sort of on the edge, we've now acquired Olive Farm Park. So we could have amended that map and changed the shape, but they were large areas. But a substantial amount of This area was undeveloped when this map was adopted. And in the meantime, almost all of this area on the north end of it has developed. And so we didn't take land dedication for most of those properties.
So let's say like next year, this one big property y'all were looking into, it gets sold to a private developer. That goes away, right? That opportunity.
That opportunity goes away. But if it's, and I can give you a perfect example. We approached a property owner in the Big Circle and said, we would really like to buy your 50 acres. And they said, we're not interested in selling. It's a farm property. We're using it. We don't live on it, but we have it. And so at that point, you know, we just said, well, we'd like you to consider selling to us whenever you're ready. We'd like to make a park. It's big, 50 acres. It's on a main road. It's a great location. We don't have anything here. We started acquiring land inside the big bubble nearby that 50-acre tract. But if that 50-acre tract was available today, I think we would still look at it. And if it came in for development, we'd say, well, if you have 50 acres and you're doing this many units, then it would be equivalent to 6 acres of dedication. They see the benefit of a 6-acre park next to their new project. We like the idea of the 6-acre park because it's on a different road network and it would provide amenities for people of a different type in the same area. And so just because someone's developing it doesn't mean we still might not get a piece of that land. But again, it's something we can work out. Them saying they'd be interested in considering it because there's a section that they could see not fitting as well into the program that they have for the development. And so they put it on their plan and they propose the dedication at a certain acreage. And we would work out the balance of that. But I think, you know, that's what we've been doing in operations. It's just this plan addresses it in the where we are in 2021, 22 versus, you know, when we were doing the analysis versus where we were in 2013. And the population change is substantial between then. So there isn't as many parcels already available. And so the smaller search area fills the gaps for all the reasons that they say, but also because of where people now are geographically located. You know, the one community center in downtown is not sufficient and is not close for everybody, especially as more traffic and more houses and development come that put people farther away from it. So.
Have any of the landowners within these little blue circles been notified of this proposed change?
I mean, we haven't on our plans contacted we have, you know, public notice and public engagement. We had maps up for people who could add comments and tell us at many events. You know, we held 2 Peak Fest events where we had big booths. Do we get everybody? No. We had some people who came specific about their properties as we were looking at plans and did focus groups and open houses. So we got some feedback from people. And some property owners in those areas we've approached before about, you know, development. I mean, the Knights Play is a great example of it's got a designation because of what it is today. But we don't have any idea. I don't know that the town is ready to, I mean, and if they were saying, we want to sell you the golf course as is and you're going to operate it, that would be a new business for us. So what it would look like if it were for sale and the town were to purchase it is like an unknown. Because we don't know that business yet, and it might be a good or not a good business for a town to operate. So,
Can I be honest?
Please.
For a second. Not that I'm not honest all the time. The yellow future park oval circles, they don't bother me as much as the blue circles because the blue circles are just. It's just so, it narrows into like maybe, you know, less than half a dozen properties. I think that's where my nervous comes in. You know, I'm just, it becomes sensitive. I think if it was broader, I wouldn't be so nervous. But I could be swayed.
So the land dedication boundaries fall to the ordinance. like land dedication is a legislative UDO set of standards. The indoor area is simply a search area. So they are less
I think
like
maybe
rules-based than,
traffic kind of.
right. I mean, it's identifying separate things, but it's a plan for us to visually be able to, you know, target that. And it doesn't specifically follow property line boundaries because that's not the intent. The intent is to get space that's, you know, spaced out. And we haven't ever had that on our maps before because we were not specifically saying, wow, we're at capacity on indoor space. And we've had discussions, like I mentioned, about being adaptive in that maybe it's not us buying, maybe it's somebody else has a, you know, as a building and they rent it to us. And so, you know, those are the kinds of things, but those don't hold, in a sense, none of them require somebody to do something or takes away their rights to do something that's not reflective on this plan. They're just the guide for us to start that next step of saying, well, if we had something in this area, we provide a service that's not available to residents that surround that or are nearby that.
Okay, are there any other questions? Well, I'm sorry, this is not put for a public comment. I apologize. We won't be able to. Maybe after the meeting, we can catch your question though. Okay. Do you have a motion, one way or the other?
Well, I'll comment. There's a lot of, and obviously we need the parks. I'm really concerned over the small areas, and I understand the one on Wimberley, the town owns a lot of that. Off Richardson, you know, not all of it, but a lot of it's the Jinx property, and Amy Olive is what's left of the Olive Farm, and over in Viridia, most of it's in one single person's property, and the blue circles is the only thing that concerns me. The rest of it I don't have a problem with. I don't know how you guys feel. We're restricting it to the.
Do we want to break this down into separate pieces then?
I like how you posed it as the GIS study, because that really, you know, what came to mind was the community, North Carolina Community College system, where their goal is to be within 30-minute drive of every North Carolinian, right? So that's kind of how I'm seeing this, is to be within a 10-minute distance of any Apex resident. But I think what we've demonstrated through all of this tonight is our ability to adapt and change and amend as needed. So, I mean, I'm not as bothered by it because I know that if there is a need, we can come back and revisit these concepts. Maps can change. Lines on maps change all the time. But this is guidance that reflects the words that are in the master plan we approved. So I would support approving the map. I will make a motion to approve the map.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the map amendments.
That's all of them?
We're making all of them at once?
Is that right?
Yes, all of them at once.
I'll second it.
Steve, we have a second. Okay, so Alyssa has first, Steve has second. All who are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have two.
Wait, no. This is a starting point, right? This is a starting point. Okay, I approve.
All right, so let's take that vote again. All those who are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose?
Aye.
Okay, so we have one dissent. It's Keith. And so the motion will carry. Okay, that wraps up item number 2. Bring us to item to number 3. Amanda, on the possible motion regarding various amendments to the UDO.
Okay. So again, a park-related item on the the first item, kind of a theme for the night. So this is a UDO amendment that was actually requested by the town council to require a double gate if a private recreation facility constructs a dog park. So it's currently no standards for these. Dog parks are not required as part of an amenity center or a recreation facility in a neighborhood. But if they do build a dog park, this is to require a double gate to protect the dogs and people too. Any questions on that one?
That's pretty common to do in dog park design,
It's
correct?
pretty standard practice, but we had an example of one that was built without the double gate, and there was no requirement for it, but so.
This is just
it's
basically
been-
codifying what's normally done.
Yes.
Okay.
But only for private.
Yeah, I mean, the town, I believe, it's a standard practice by the town, but we didn't add that as a use standard for park active or park passive.
Do you mean like a gate and then a vestibule and then another gate?
Yeah, so yeah, it's to keep dogs from escaping in that in between. Yeah. Okay. The next amendment is a request by both the Planning Committee of Town Council and planning staff. So the Planning Committee of Town Council requested that we increase the amount of EV charging spaces for apartments. Recognizing that where people live is where the charging stations are more typically needed. And then there are additional amendments as proposed by planning staff, and I'll point those out. So the proposal is to eliminate the cap as well on the number of EV charging spaces where they are required. Currently, the requirement is capped at 10. And then we are proposing a minimum number of changing the schedule for EV ready spaces, which is where the conduit is installed to prepare for a future charging station to be located. And based upon those percentages that are proposed, it relates to the change in numbers here. So the proposal is for multifamily or apartment to increase, I'll start with the EV ready spaces. For multifamily or apartment to have 10% of all vehicle required spaces as EV ready spaces, and then to also increase the number of charging stations from 3% to 10%. For the remaining uses that were already listed in the table, there is a proposal to require 15% of those vehicle spaces as EV ready, recognizing that vehicle manufacturers have indicated that in 10 years from now, all new vehicles are going to be electric. So preparing for that, and it's much cheaper and easier to install this up front than it is to retrofit a parking area after the fact. And then the only other change in the changes in commercial uses is based upon the cap being removed. And then we are proposing an increase in hotel or motel from 3% to 5%, looking at that as a residential type use where people are sleeping overnight and have the ability to charge their vehicles while they're traveling. Just some clarification wording here, nothing of substance. And then we are proposing a reduction in the distance between electric vehicle charging equipment from 10 feet to 5 feet, and proposing 2 new standards that the outer edge of electric vehicle charging equipment shall not be illuminated. If you've seen the shiny Tesla ones, you'll know what we're talking about. Because with the increase in the number, we did not want this to become an aesthetic issue. And then for the use of multifamily or apartment, electric vehicle charging spaces and EV ready spaces shall be dispersed near the buildings on the site. So ensuring they're not all concentrated by one building. And that is the end of the amendments. Planning staff is recommending approval. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does the EV...
You know what? We didn't bring Ryan back to the meeting.
That's what we were gonna do.
Yeah.
As soon as they started talking, I'm like, oh.
My apologies to you, sir. Okay, well then, do you want to back us back out?
You can just pause right here and
Okay.
and invite him back.
I'll make a motion to invite Ryan back to the meeting.
Second.
All those are in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, welcome back, Ryan.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Yes.
On the EV charging stations that are accessible, it says that if you have 26 to 50 spaces total, 26 to 50 that are provided electric vehicle charging spaces, 2 of those has to be accessible. My experience is that van accessible especially are very big, and it can be quite costly from an engineering standpoint. Can that double count as your accessible required for the parking area in general? Or are we having to do one van accessible and one EV van accessible? I guess in other words, are these accessible spaces mutually exclusive for EV uses and non-EV uses, or can they be combined?
I mean, this could be, I mean, the intent is that it's accessible, but it's not strictly signed to. So if there was no one that, I see what you're saying.
The reason, all right, so another example.
It's in addition, and the reason it's in addition is the EV space can be used by anybody.
Yeah.
It's just accessible. It's not marked
Right.
accessible only. Anyone can use it, but it's set up so that there's enough moving space around it for someone if they were in a van and in a wheelchair. This does not.
So you're saying
this
it's
does
a
not meet ADA.
Oh, okay. So this is an accessible, like it could be ADA, but it's not ADA
Not signed for
signed.
that.
It is not an accessible space. It is set up to allow someone who would need an accessible space to charge their vehicle. But
Okay.
anyone with any vehicle could use it. There's not gonna be a $250 fine, like all that.
Right.
It's just big enough that someone parks their van, puts out the ramp, rolls in a wheelchair down, they
I
can get all the way
understand.
around it.
I was just thinking out loud, like, because some of the ADA requirements are placement, particularly to the front of the building, closest proximity has to be ADA. So now you're like, but in this case, it could be remote.
This isn't even for someone trying to get to the building. This is for someone trying to charge their car that is they have an accessibility issue.
Sure.
Yeah, but it
So it
wouldn't
does
have to
not
meet
meet
all the
ADA.
other accessibility requirements.
I wonder though, under accessible, the ADA Act, because it's an amenity use, that it would then trigger having an ADA route from that public use
Now
to
we
the
have
building.
one out here. All they did was they painted around our EV space out here to make it big enough to be for a van and someone in a wheelchair to be able to go around the vehicle. But it's not marked as accessible. It does not have
You
a
don't need to
route
get
the
from
building.
that stall to the front door of your building with an accessible route, you don't think?
If in the real world, you would drive up in your van and you could charge it, but it wouldn't be that you would immediately be going to your building. If you need to get in the building, you park in a regular space and go in the building. Someday, they will probably require both, but right now, it's not required. This is best practice. And we have a standard that we added to the spec book, I guess.
Yeah, we're working on a standard detail for how these look. I'm done.
The township is the township looking? Do you say the town?
The town is looking at, we have a standard specification engineering policy manual, and so we're looking for a standard specification for an EV charging space. So where's the equipment in relationship to the sidewalk and the path around in this case, so it's clear how these need to be designed and people do them the right way.
Sorry, I got another question. The EV provision that apartments that have an AMI provision for affordability, it says they're not subject to this, but what if you have a kind of a proffer on a zoning where, 10% of the units are 60% or 80% AMI, would that pro rata apply to the EV? Or is that just the project, if it were 100%, 80% AMI would not be subject to this?
The way this is worded is that an apartment project with average rents, so it's the whole project, not the pro rata you don't get a discount for the affordable units in your apartment development, the way I read this. I don't know, there may be another way to
That's
do
the way
it.
I read it too, because it says the project,
This
not,
is just exempting basically tax credit housing.
okay.
Amanda, if you go forward one more, yeah. You got multifamily or apartment, 10% have to have EV ready and 10% require a motor vehicle. But hotel or motel, you require 5% more EV ready, but 7% less spaces. Those two inversions, how is a hotel motel sort of different from an apartment, I'll say?
Well, hotels aren't always at 100% capacity. I mean, typically apartment complexes, at least around an Apex, they're like 95% or better, you know. So,
Okay, okay.
I think Amanda's done a fantastic job.
this was a team effort. Jenna Schaus and Diane. And this was not me, all me.
I do have a general question about the EV spaces, though. I mean, they're not marked as EV only, right? So you can have the
correct.
spaces, because they're going to put, from a contracting side, you're going to put all the EV spaces right up front, probably right next to your ADA compliant spaces, because you don't want to run but so far off the building. It becomes a cost issue. So anybody and everybody could park there.
Right. There's no requirement in our standards to. I mean, there's shall be posted with signage. This is an EV space, but there's no restriction that anybody could park there. It's just like if I go up and park in a hybrid space and I don't drive a hybrid, at some stores. So.
There's no legal thing behind there saying you will be.
No. An apartment complex may set a standard for their residents. You shall not, unless you are an EV. But there's no requirement by the town to restrict these to EV only.
Okay.
My thoughts on this, I'm doing a lot of multifamily in Apex right now, and I think 3 of our projects are presumably the first deck wrap. So, a 5-story parking deck with multifamily around it. It scares me if we don't at least have conduit in that parking deck for what you cited as, 10% of the vehicles in the future, maybe more. Who knows what the future is? I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball, but if we don't plan for it, then we're doing it a disservice, because God knows if I bought an electric vehicle and couldn't charge it, I'd be very frustrated. So but on the flip side, what if gasoline hits $2 a gallon and all of a sudden we're all buying petro again? I like that flexibility too. So maybe having the wiring is good, because you have a cheaper alternative, maybe not installing that many charging stations that are just going to sit there vacant. I don't know, but I love the idea of doing the conduit at a way higher rate than we're currently doing, because when those parking decks are poured, that's your one shot. It's like developing multifamily low density. Once it's there for our lifetime. You're not going to redevelop that. So you got one shot. I think it's prudent to ask for more conduit. I don't know about the actual number of EV charging stations, but I can tell you, living in the northwest part of Apex, I feel like every 3rd vehicle is a Tesla. So maybe we're there. I don't know. Empirically
Well, and we
speaking,
have
we're
found
there.
recently that some apartment complexes have offered 5% as a zoning condition, increasing from the 3% that's required by UDO. So, and willingly, without grousing about it. So.
Very good. Any other comments? Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'd like
Not
to
all
make a
at once.
motion to approve the amendments to UDO as presented by Amanda.
Okay, so Sarah's got motion. Keith will second. All those who are in favor, say aye. Aye. All those who oppose? Okay. Passes unanimously as well. Okay. All right, well, we need one more motion.
Can I make the final motion to adjourn?
Yes, Sarah has the motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
Alyssa's going to second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.